Hi there, listener, and welcome to this ski podcast special, which is an interview with Tom Greenall. Tom explains how he qualified as a pisteur in France, enabling him to join the ski patrol. He talks about how it started off with racing against 11-year-olds to learning how to ski with a bloodwagon in his hands. It's a very interesting story that I think you'll enjoy, and one rarely tackled by Brits. So sit back and listen to how to become a pisteur. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, Tom Greenall, who is going to be telling us how you can qualify, or how it's possible to qualify as a pisteur in France. Now, Tom is based in Chamonix. He's the founder of Idris Skis, which was an environmental ski way before everyone else started creating them back in 2009. He also ran a cat skiing operation in Japan, which we're going to run as a feature in the podcast at some point in the future, but currently based in Chamonix. How are you today, Tom?
Very well, thank you.
And have you been on the mountain recently? Go on, tell us.
Snowshoeing yesterday and ski touring the day before.
Great. And what are the conditions like at the moment for ski touring?
At the moment, they're soft underfoot and a little scary in the high mountain because we've had a lot of snow and now the temperature is rising.
Right. Okay. Whereabouts have you done your ski touring?
Myself here in Les Orres and mostly in Saint-Gervais and Les Contamines, as the whole world is playing with the big hills.
Yes. Okay. It's a busier week at the moment. Well, I'm very jealous of the fact that you've been able to go onto the mountain. But the reason I asked you to meet up today is to find out more about, to me, a British person becoming a pisteur. It's quite an amazing story, and I believe it's obviously quite difficult to do. And I wondered if you could just take us through the steps, the many steps that you have to go through to be able to get that qualification. How does it start off? What's the starting point?
The start, as with almost all sports qualifications in France, starts by going to visit your doctor.
Right.
You need a certificate of fitness, or rather a certificate saying that there is no reason against you doing this particular sport or qualification.
Yeah. I do a bunch of trail running, which is often in France, or even triathlons. And for all of those, either a triathlon or a trail running, you need to have a signed document from your doctor saying that you're fit to be able to take part. So you get your certificate, and then obviously, what's the next step?
Literally off to the races.
Okay.
You need a test technique, which is a test of how good you are at skiing off-piste. But to be allowed to do this, you must prove that you can ski quickly, which in this case means doing a ski school race, normally with the ESF, and reaching the level of Fleche Vermillion, which is the second highest level.
The second highest level, okay. And the way that works, if I recall correctly, normally there's like a forerunner who sets a time, and then you have to get a certain percentage of their time. Is that right?
Yep, this is true. And I thought, well, I'm a reasonably good skier. I've skied a couple of serious North Faces. I raced as a kid, although that's more than 25 years ago. So I rocked up with a pair of piste skis, joined up with a bunch of 10 to 15-year-olds and one or two others who are actually retired skiers, retired people who are skiing and deciding to get into racing for a bit of fun. Thought this will be easy, and failed to qualify by 0.04 seconds.
Right. Okay. Gutting. Yeah. How many times did you have to do it then before you managed to get that?
Just twice.
Vermillion. Okay.
But between the first and second, I was lucky enough to get some training from my friend Glen Plake, who you may or may not have heard of.
It sounds a little like you're name dropping there, Tom. But I believe Glen Plake has strong connections with the Chamonix Valley. He's often out there. Is that right?
Yes, he owns a place in the centre of Chamonix, and this winter will be the first winter he's not skied here since 1987.
Right. Okay. But he's not known as a racer. So what kind of tips was he giving you?
Well, he is a fully qualified instructor, and he did race up until his debut in the extreme movies.
Okay. So he gave you a few tips and that helped you get ahead of the 11-year-olds.
He tidied up my skiing, and I was 3 whole seconds faster on my next go, but the Vorlaufer was 2 whole seconds faster, so I passed by just under a second.
Okay, great. So that's the first step. You get your Fleche, and then you can go straight into the test technique, can you?
Yes. The test technique is very similar to the test technique that the guides would have, but only in descent form. You don't also have to run up a hill. It is officially 300 vertical meters of off-piste, and you show that you can ski fast and well. In reality, it's 450 plus meters of unpleasant moguls.
Okay, that they would always pick that type of terrain, would they? Or is that because lots of people have gone down already?
That is the minimum. If they can, they find something less pleasant to ski, but is safe.
Okay, so you're skiing, you have to ski a certain descent off piste and ski it well and fast. So that's really a very subjective viewpoint, right?
Yes,
there's no time involved or anything like that.
But to put it in perspective, they're looking for speeds of 50 kilometers an hour or greater, and large, smooth turns, regardless of how bumpy it is. You do not ski the zipper line as a mogul competitor.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No daffies in the middle of your run then.
Daffy would be acceptable, but 10 continuous short turns is a no-no. When you change angle, say you go over a rollover, you could put in 3 or 4 short turns to get your bearings and then return to giant slalom or even super giant slalom turns, and just making the moguls disappear by compressing them.
Right. So there's very specific guidelines. Now, I would think that given your background, a lot of off-piste skiing, this would suit you much more than the racing side of things. Does that mean it was easier to get through this stage?
Once I knew what I was doing, it took me 4 attempts.
Right. Okay.
The first attempt, I knew about it at the last minute. I was phoned at 5 p.m. by the organizers in Puy St Vincent. I drove overnight to get there, promptly turned up, and I didn't fall over, but that was probably the best bit about my skiing.
Right. And Puy St Vincent, if you're going from Chamonix, that's somewhere down near Serre Chevalier or Briançon or something, is that right?
It's Briançon, and then it's about 45 minutes further on.
Yeah, so you had to drive from Chamonix down there overnight, then get up and ski the next day, trying to, fulfill all these criteria.
Yeah, not knowing what any of the criteria were, but
so that one didn't go through. You got second chance.
Well, like I said, it was my 4th go, but this first one really set me up for this is a bit tougher than I expected. Right. There was 150 people in the morning and 150 people in the afternoon.
Okay.
2 to 4 foot high refrozen moguls. They accepted 5 people from the morning session and 3 from the afternoon session.
Oh my God, that is such a low pass rate.
My next was in Chatel.
Yeah.
But it was a rescheduled one that was supposed to be up in the Vosges in the north.
Yeah, okay.
I did actually have 3 days notice of the rescheduling. This one was much larger moguls. You could almost lose yourself between them, but very variable weather. The visibility was okay for the first 10, and then the visibility was less than 10 feet.
Yeah, not ideal for what
the guy in front of me was a competitor on the World Freeride Tour. The guy behind me was a competitor on the FIS slalom circuit, all three of us received 11.5 out of 12. Sorry, 11.5 out of 20. You need 12 to pass.
Right. Okay. So did that have similar pass rates to the first one that you went to?
Suspiciously, most people who had a Vosges address passed, and 37 out of 90 passed.
Right.
But they know full well that they are going to end up working in their part of the world, and they really struggle to attract pisteurs, being what's known to most skiers as the flat part of France.
Yeah, for sure. To listeners who are not familiar with that, the Vosges is to the north, just kind of, I want to say, opposite Germany, on the other side of the river. I can't think what the river is. The Rhone.
The Rhone.
Yeah.
The Rhine. The Rhine.
The Rhine.
And it's a part of France which has, in our history, been German.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. But I understand what you're saying there. You know, if you live in Vosges, you're probably not going to be coming down to the Alps to work. So that was a second one in Chatel. Third one, where was that one?
Third one was Serre Chevalier. Probably 20 people passed again. Nice weather, nice conditions. I just didn't know what they were particularly looking for. So on smoother sections, I did large sweeping turns. On mogul fields, I just held the zipper line and put in quite pretty turns. But I didn't know that this isn't what they were looking for.
It must have been really frustrating by this stage. I mean, you've gone along 3 times. You're traveling around the country. You know, that's another one in the southern French Alps. Did you always? You obviously must have been very determined that you were going to keep going with this project and not.
I knew from friends who'd previously done it that it was a challenge to pass the test, and there wasn't always rhyme and reason. The best example is a French friend who is actually a first aid instructor. She had been a ski patroller for 5 years in Canada, 7 years on the World Freeride Tour, and passed her test technique on her 6th go.
Right. Okay. Well, that's encouraging, because you said you passed on your 4th. So we're coming to the 4th now. Where was that one?
Back in Serre Chevalier, back in Puy St Vincent, sorry.
Yeah.
Where I had first tried. But the big difference this time is I managed to get a space on the preparation course.
Right. Okay.
The preparation course was being run by a mountain guide instructor who specialized in this particular test and the guides test.
Right. Okay. And would that give you the opportunity to ski the actual location for the test itself?
Yes. But in the end, it was the knowing what they wanted to see and a week of very hard physical training.
Yeah. I mean, you know, when you're talking about something qualitative like that, you need to know what the judges, if that's what they call the arbiters or whatever, are looking for. And I can see how being there in advance and having that prep, rather than schlepping somewhere overnight like you had to before. So that was brilliant. So you qualified. How do you find out that you've qualified? Do they send a letter, or is it at the end of the course? Or
most times you just stand around and wait at the end for hours on end, or you can generally phone them that evening, or wait 4 days for an email or 3 weeks for the letter.
Oh my God! Yeah. So how did you find out on that successful one at Puy St Vincent?
They phoned me that evening.
Cool. That must have been very super exciting for you.
It was a great sense of relief, especially as the whole ski world stopped existing the next day due to our current situation.
Ah, right. Okay. So that's the timing of it. So it was around a year ago, roughly March 2020, right?
It was the Friday, and on the Saturday evening, the French resorts closed, I think 19th of March.
Wow,
or something like that.
Great timing, Tom. That's fantastic. In this section, Tom explains about the first aid courses he had to take, and also about the full Pisteur course, how you actually get that qualification. Now, so that's the skiing side of things. You had to have your flesh, and you have your test technique. You mentioned, a friend of yours who took 6 times, who had a first aid qualification. But at the same time as all of this, you also have to have those type of qualifications as well. Is that right?
Yes. In France, there is a standard for anybody who works in the rescue industry, whether you be a firefighter, a policeman, a ski patroller, a lifeguard, etc. And it is called Premiere Secours Equipe, first aid in a team, levels 1 and 2. And generally you do this with the fire brigade, and it takes 2 weeks.
Okay. Sorry, when you say you do it with the fire brigade, they're the people who train you through it,
yes,
are they?
You literally turn up at a fire station, whether it's a group of 12 or 20 of you, depending on the particular course, and firemen, as part of their job as instructors of safety, give the course.
Right. Okay. Now, that's obviously in French. I mean, that sounds like it's probably going to be quite technical. How is your French?
My French, when it comes to technical, is quite good. My conversational is quite poor.
So unless you're talking about first aid or technical issues to do with skiing or something like that, I mean, did you do anything to improve your French as part of the process?
Not really, but I was lucky in that the first aid, I had previously done almost everything we covered on the course. So it was, for me, it was much more, how does this work in French, as opposed to learning the skills from scratch.
Okay, and that course was 2 weeks, you said, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
And is there a pass or a fail, or essentially you just you do it for 2 weeks?
That particular qualification is run as more of a continuous assessment.
Right.
And quite early on, you are pushed if you are weak in certain areas.
Right. Okay.
The spoken French was actually my struggle, and was never between me and casualty, but me and whoever was the base over a radio call.
Okay, but you passed that, so
yes,
you've got your skiing qualifications, your first aid qualifications, and I guess then you have to learn how to literally be a pisteur, right?
In my case, it was a 5-week residential course.
Okay.
In some cases, it is 6 weeks, although the 6th week would actually be a little pointless for me, as it is a immersion English course.
Right. Okay. But so you said that you qualified at Puy St Vincent, so you got your test technique just before resorts were closed, lockdown.
Yeah.
So when did this course take place? A 5-week course?
In November and December of this last autumn.
Right. Your timing then has just been immaculate, really, in being able to fit all of these things in. Quite a commitment, though. I mean, obviously, if someone's, changing their career or wanting to take this up, then I guess there's no way around it. But a 5-week residential course is a big deal. And presumably it costs a bit of money as well, right?
Yes. All in just over €3,000 for just the patrol course.
Okay, and where was your course then? The residential
mine
one?
was in Les Orres, which is near Lac-Embrun, south of Briançon.
Lots of your stuff was in the southern French Alps, not ideally located. Yeah, okay. And so 5 weeks in total, excluding, didn't have to do the UK week. What are the kind of things that you tackle during those weeks?
Well, the first week is Connaissance Moyenne Montagne, understanding the middle mountain. 2 days of snow and weather knowledge, and 3 days of bureaucracy, because France.
Right, okay. But so that's an interesting middle mountain. I've obviously heard of the high mountain before. You have high mountain guys, but this is a separate area of...
The French definition of high mountain is easier to understand than what is the middle mountain.
Right.
Glaciers and rocks which require ropes to climb.
Middle mountain's more the pisted areas then.
It's anything that you don't need to rock climb to get into or walk upon a glacier. It's not actually an altitude, it's a terrain definition.
Okay. And when you say learning about, weather and snow, the snow side of things is the type of thing that if you're doing an avalanche course, you're looking at the snow pack or something like that, is it?
Yes, but it only went into a very superficial depth. It is two separate add-on qualifications to a pisteur if you are becoming a weather observer or a snow specialist.
Okay. And in relation to weather then, were you being taught then how to predict changes or?
No. How the weather that we have and what particular weathers affect our environment. A good example being the Föhn effect, where on the windward side you would get heavy snow and cold temperatures, and on the leeward side you would get warm temperatures and melting or rain, and how this may affect a ski resort.
Right.
You have to remember a lot of people who are coming into this course haven't necessarily got mountain skills prior to this course.
Right, I understand. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So you're learning all of that side of things about the mountain. You've got your first aid side of things as well. When people think of pisteurs, most of the time the contact with them is watching them bash a drag lift with a hammer to try and get it moving again or something, or the more of a maybe a worst case scenario. They think of people with with what British people call a bloodwagon. Presumably, you have to practice that at some point as well.
Yeah, the driving the bloodwagon due to the snow and the COVID restrictions was only in our 4th and 5th week.
Right.
But the bloodwagons, there are two very particular sorts here in France, or actually in the Alps in general. One that would be probably best described as a towable sledge. It has one set of long poles coming out the end that you hold on to.
Yeah.
And it has a little tent that covers the victim's head so that they don't get covered in the snow from your skis.
Yeah, I think I can visualize that one. Yeah.
But these two long poles, when you push them down towards the snow, they apply some brakes to slow the sled down, meaning it's quite easy for one person to control this sled, hence the lack of a set of poles on the other end. The other type is more of a bathtub shape with handles, normally with looped ends sticking out of both ends.
Yeah.
And it's more of a on-snow stretcher. You do slide it upon the snow most of the time, but you can pick it up. And when loaded, it requires two people to safely navigate the mountain.
And would you say that one or either of those is more difficult than the other to handle, to get down a mountain?
The one with two sets of handles requires a reasonable amount of coordination between the two of you. And it requires better skiing skills, but it's more because it's intended for use off-piste.
Right. Okay.
So you have to cope with whatever's under your feet, hence the difficulty of the test technique, because you should be able to ski at any speed regardless of the conditions. So you can concentrate upon keeping your victim comfortable as opposed to worrying about, can I make this next turn?
Sure. And speed is obviously a factor as well, because if you have an injured party, then you want to get them to medical attention as quickly as you can.
More, you need to get yourself quickly to the scene to either alleviate their pain or just make them safe from other dangers.
Yeah.
Is the speed. Getting them to safely, quickly We in France are taught to do as much as we can for them before we move them.
Okay.
In other parts of the world, the North American method is known as scoop and shoot by the French.
Right.
Scoop them up into the sledge and off you go.
Okay, so slightly different approach, and I guess obviously you're not practicing. There's no victims. But you must have presumably volunteer victims, and you're practicing. You're notionally on duty at the top of a lift. You get the call, and you have to respond quickly and get a victim into a sled.
We only once actually went through that in that sort of chronological order. We did spend 2 whole weeks and then every afternoon for the following 2 weeks practicing the first aid, and then in the later 2 weeks at the very end, the last move was load them into the sled.
Okay.
And being a group of 26, we would normally split into 3 teams where you would have 1 victim, 1 patroller in charge, and then 1 to 4 assisting patrollers.
Okay.
And you would do either a simple or a complicated rescue scenario. And this might not just be a complicated injury, it may also be a complicated extraction.
Okay, so I can see there's a lot of different elements in there. I think this is probably very interesting to listeners because this is a scenario that they're most likely to have seen. And is there a kind of protocol for how you alert other members of the public, or how you decide that you're going to close down a piste or something like that?
When arriving, say, at a piste accident, you would first of all take your skis off and cross them as you would see stereotypically a crossed pair of skis.
Yeah.
And then you would take out your signpost, which is in your rescue sled, and put that up above the victim before actually approaching the victim.
Okay.
If it is, I think the French word is probably best, un bordel, a complete mess.
Yep.
Once you have done these 2 things, then you would radio your central office to say that you need your colleagues to close the piste.
And so that's the practice for the bloodwagon side of things. Incidentally, does that translate at all? Bloodwagon? Do the French have an expression for that?
No, they don't call it a bloodwagon. There are many things that do translate, but no, they would call one is a traîneau and one is a barquette.
Yeah. Okay.
Both of which, when you put them into a translator or look them up in the dictionary, say sledge.
Right. Okay. More simple. The British translations, such as piste basher and bloodwagon, are both slightly more dramatic than snow groomer or
yeah. Although the French, as well as calling a snow groomer, which is dameuse, also call it an engine de damage,
right,
which could be translated as engine of bashing.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Maybe they're closer than I thought. In this final section, Tom tells us about the different type of pisteurs, the lifties and the avalanche security guys, and he also tells us where he might be working next season.
The equipe, or the team that run the lifts, is generally a completely separate team, although you as a pisteur, as a ski patroller, are expected to know how to not just stop a lift, but how to start it and control its speed.
And I guess a part of, or a key part of the course is, in terms of avalanches, we referred to the snowpack earlier. Often the pisteurs, the snow patrol, are the first on the scene for trying to find a victim. That must be quite a big part of the course.
The searching for an avalanche victim, yes. The rest of the snow is a 1 to 3, depending on which week course that you do as extra. There is snow and weather observer, which is a week course. There is pisteur level 2, which is 2 weeks of snow study and one of regulation. And then there is a 2-week course of artificier, which would be explosives expert.
Okay. Tempted by that one. I think most people seem to think that one's really appealing. The guys who drop a dynamite over the edge of a cornice to start avalanches.
We had all of that explained to us because we may be called upon to be an aide artificier, the assistant to the explosive expert, and all the rules and regulations, because you are the safety backup, you are the eyes, you are the second set of ears in an explosives procedure, and you carry the detonator until it's time to make an explosion, but you don't get to play with the toys.
Yeah, well, it's still a pretty responsible job. I mean, on the podcast before, I recall that we've covered a number of these things. There was a program called A&E, featured the ski patrol in Val Thorens, which was quite dramatized, but it was a really interesting insight. Now, you have your qualification now, but I presume this winter you haven't started work. Do you have a job confirmed? Would you be working if the lists were open?
I do not have a job confirmed. Presserali have said, we'll get back to you as soon as we're allowed to open, but I'm more likely to end up next year in Les Contamines or the Megève Saint-Gervais area.
Okay, and when you say more likely, do you have a kind of connection, or they just need more staff? How does that work out?
I've been talking to all of them, and I know that at least 3 of them didn't hire the 2 or 3, depending on which resort, that they needed to fill their number of pisteurs this year, because they were hedging their bets on the situation being as it is.
Yeah. Okay. And when you do start, let's say you're in Contamine working there during the winter. My impression is that it's not very good if you're someone who likes to lie in, because it's a pretty early start in the mornings. Is that right?
A regular non-snow safety start would be walking out of the, for want of a better word, the locker room to get on the lift in Contamine, it would normally be 8 o'clock in the morning on a normal non-snow safety morning. On a snow safety morning, you will be meeting your colleagues at 5 to ride up on a snowmobile or a snowcat. So,
you'd be up to the top of slopes. In my experience, you often see tracks, the first tracks coming down, and a bit of maybe untracked powder from the pisteurs, the ski patrol. Is that part of the appeal at all?
Not so much, because I've been lucky enough on a personal and professional standpoint to get first tracks for at least 50% of the days of a winter in one particular job that we will touch on in the future on. First tracks every run for the whole winter. Right.
Sorry, are you referring to the
to Mikuni?
The cat skiing operation in Japan, right? So you've had your fill of that, but unfortunately no job for this season. Do you think there's any chance you'll work this season at all? Do you think that this season is
towards the very end of the season, but more of the yes, we'd like you for next season. We want you to help us shut down the resort so you know where things are to set it up the next autumn.
It's a really interesting story, Tom, and I think there'll be a lot of people out there who will be tempted by that idea of becoming a ski patroller, etc. But hopefully when we go out to Contamine or Megève next season, maybe we won't hope that we'll see you, because if we see you, then that means that we're probably in trouble. But hopefully you'll be out there looking after us and keeping the piece in shape. So thank you very much for sharing all of that for us. And we'll definitely have you back on the show again to talk about that cat skiing operation in Japan, and maybe about Idris skis as well. So thanks very much for your time today, Tom.
You take care, Ian.
Hi there, listener. Ian here. I just wanted to let you know that you can now support the Ski Podcast at buymeacoffee.com. This blank season has been a tough winter for all snow lovers. I've spent a lot of time and put in a lot of effort to try and give you an episode every week through this winter to give you your taste of snow, even if we can't go out there ourselves. Now, I do it anyway because I love skiing, but if you do enjoy the Ski Podcast and you'd like to support us, then you can literally buy me a coffee, or in my case a tea, at buymeacoffee.com. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/the Ski Podcast. Thanks very much.